Have you ever asked yourself why your heart's still bleeding from a breakup that ended months ago? Why the pain sits in your chest like an anchor that you can't lift? What if I told you that there are a few things that you're doing without even realizing it that are quietly blocking your healing every single day? And unless you confront them, you'll stay stuck in the same sorrow, the same emotional cycle, the same spiritual fog that God never intended for you to live in. Because heartbreak, it doesn't hold on to you. You hold on to it. You grip it out of habit, out of emotional muscle memory. You keep reaching for what God already removed. You keep revisiting, places where He already closed the door. And every time that you look back, you reopen a wound that He was trying to heal. The Bible says, remember not the former things, but some of you are still kneeling at the gravesides of a relationship that God buried for your protection. Today, we're done with that. So let me give you 5 things that you might be doing that are preventing you from healing from that breakup. And when you finally see them for what they are, you'll never let them control you again. Plus, I'm not sugarcoating anything here because you don't need comfort, you need truth. You need a wake-up call that breaks a cycle for good. But before we begin, if you watched any of my previous content and have not yet subscribed, please go ahead and do so. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers. We're currently at like 980 subscribers, I think, at the time of filming this video. So, it'll mean a lot to me if you subscribe if you haven't already. And also, follow me on Instagram because I post daily reels and stories there. Well, that'll help you level up your relationship game. But without further ado, here are 5 reasons why you might be delaying your own healing. And watch till the end because I'm going to go ahead and give you one bonus reason that I believe is very, very important. Let's begin. Reason number 1, you keep reopening emotional wounds by checking on them. You cannot heal from someone that you continually check up on. You can't heal from someone whose life you keep monitoring through your phone like it's a TV show. Every time that you look at their page, every time that you hover over their stories, every time you stalk their new relationship or try to, figure out, what their caption means, you're emotionally, stabbing yourself, thinking that you're just getting closure. But checking on them, it doesn't give closure. Checking on them gives confusion. It pulls you back into the exact cycle that you're trying to break. It's like trying to cure dehydration by drinking salt water. You feel a momentary satisfaction, but all it does, it just makes you more thirsty, more empty, more dependent on the wrong thing. Breakup pain, well, it becomes addictive when you keep feeding the same emotional loops that hurt you. You think that you're curious, but really, you're craving the familiarity of pain. So as long as you keep feeding that addiction, healing, it always feel out of reach. You see, every view, every scroll, every profile check is like ripping the stitches off of a wound that God is trying to close. Where your attention goes, where your heart follows. And if your attention is still on them, well, your heart, it will never, never leave them. It's like they never left them. You can pray for peace all you want, but peace cannot enter a heart that's still tied to someone that God removed for your protection. So distance, it's not optional. Distance is the medicine and it's necessary. Reason number 2, you're romanticizing the relationship instead of remembering the reality. Now, this one's the most dangerous form of self-sabotage after a breakup because the mind, well, it plays tricks on you. Your memory, it starts editing the past like you're trying to create a movie trailer that never existed. You highlight the good moments and mute the painful ones. You romanticize the beginning, the affectionate words, the deep talks, but you skip over the nights that you cried yourself to sleep. You skip over the times that you felt alone, even when, they were right next to you. You skip over the disrespect, the inconsistency, the emotional chaos, the spiritual confusion. And the more you idealize a relationship, the more impossible it becomes to move forward. Romanticizing the past is like, placing a diamond filter over a cracked mirror. It looks beautiful until you step close enough to see the damage. You cannot heal from what you continue to glorify. You cannot, release someone that you keep rewriting in your mind. Let me put it this way. A breakup is like removing poison from your system, but instead of flushing it out, you keep sipping tiny doses of nostalgia, hoping that it will bring comfort, but all it brings is just spiritual sickness. You're not in love with them anymore. You're in love with the fantasy of who you wanted them to become. Healing, well, it becomes a moment that you stop negotiating with memories and start accepting reality. Hey, 2 quick things. 1, make sure you follow me on Instagram because I post daily content there that doesn't make it here on YouTube. I post daily reels, daily stories, content that help you uplift your spirits if you're going through, relationship adversity. And number 2 is that as I was editing this video, I realized that reason number 3 had technical difficulties with the audio and the video. So we're gonna go ahead and skip number 3 and just go straight to reason number 4. But make sure you follow me on Instagram. I'm gonna leave the link to my Instagram down in the description below. Reason number 4, you're still holding on to things that keep you emotionally tied to them. Now, healing, it requires separation, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and environmentally. The human heart, it bonds through reminders, smells, objects, places, songs, photos. So they all create emotional anchors. And some of you are, trying to move on while living in a museum of your ex. Their hoodie is still on your chair. Their pictures are still on your phone. Their toothbrush is still in your drawer. You still have letters, gifts, screenshots, playlists, everything that ties your emotions back to their memory. And you wonder why, healing feels impossible. You cannot heal in an environment designed to keep you in bondage. Trying to move on while keeping their things is like trying to swim while holding a suitcase filled with bricks. It's not going to work. There's a reason that God, told Lot's wife not to look back, because looking back roots you in the past. And some of you aren't just looking back, you're living back. If you want peace, you need to remove, the portals that pull you in an emotional time travel. Letting go, it's not petty, it's not disrespectful, it's not dramatic, it's necessary. You're not throwing away memories, you're creating room for new ones. Reason number 5, you're waiting for them to come back instead of preparing for what's ahead. Now, this one might be the hardest truth that I give you today. Some of you aren't healing because you're still emotionally waiting for them. You haven't moved on because you're holding on to a belief that maybe, just maybe, they'll come back. You keep the door cracked open just in case, right? You imagine the conversations where they apologize. You imagine the moment that they realized what they lost. You imagine the reunion, the restoration, the do-over. But waiting for someone who already left is emotional imprisonment. You're giving the most valuable thing you have, your future, to a person who already replaced you in their past. You're pausing your healing for a possibility that probably won't exist. God doesn't remove people for no reason. Sometimes he removes them because they were blocking blessings that you couldn't see. Sometimes he removes them because their presence, it was delaying your spiritual growth. Sometimes he removes them because they were a comfort zone that was preventing you from becoming who he called you to be. If something was truly meant for you, it would not walk away from you. If it walked away, its chapter was over, period. So stop giving CPR to relationships that God allowed to die. Your future is calling, but you can't answer it while waiting for someone who hung up on you. Now, here's the bonus reason I told you I'd give you. Bonus reason number 6. You need someone who loves and fears God more than anything. Because someone who fears God won't play with your heart. Someone who seeks God won't betray your trust. Someone who honors God will know how to love you correctly. Healing, it prepares you for that kind of person. Healing from a breakup isn't just about, letting go of a person. It's about letting go of the version of yourself that tolerated what God never intended for you. You're stepping into a season of growth, clarity, and strength. This breakup, it didn't destroy you. It revealed you. It showed you where your boundaries were missing. It showed you where your self-worth was weak. It showed you what parts of you needed healing, and it showed you what God was trying to protect you from. So stop asking for the chapter that God already closed. Stop reopening wounds that he's trying to heal. Stop revisiting the people that he's trying to remove. Your healing begins the moment that you stop looking back. And today, that moment is right now. So take a breath, lift your head, straighten your back, and step forward into the future that God designed for you. Before you click off this video, remember to like and subscribe if this message brought you any value. Now, make sure you follow me on Instagram for daily breakup and relationship wisdom. If you have a question that you want me, to answer in a future video, well then DM me on Instagram. I'll keep you anonymous and I'll break it down in one of my upcoming videos. The link to my IG is down in the description below and in the pinned comments. Thanks for watching. Have a blessed day.